Welcome to a space of unexpected and emotional stories, where we explore unforgettable moments. Today, let us step into a special event, a story of kindness, courage, and miraculous changes. Our story begins in a bustling neighborhood, where a family is facing harsh challenges. In a busy street, where the hustle and bustle of life sweeps everything away, there is a family struggling to get by day. It is the Parker family, with tired and worried expressions etched on each of their faces. The mother, Olivia, clutches a handful of small coins, her eyes filled with sadness as she looks at her empty wallet. She's trying to calculate if this meager amount will be enough to buy a modest dinner for her children. Beside her, little Chloe, her young daughter, looks on with a sorrowful gaze. Meanwhile, her son Liam, though only 10 years old, already bears the weight of scarcity on his small shoulders. They step into a small grocery store, the soft chime of the doorbell ringing like a faint greeting. Their hesitant footsteps echo through the brightly lit space of the store. Olivia scans the shelves, exhaustion evident on her face. She carefully picks out a loaf of bread and a small carton of milk. Liam whispers softly to his mother, "Mom, can I get this?" He holds up a small packet of cookies, his eyes sparkling with hope. But Olivia only shakes her head gently, and her face full of sadness. "Not today, sweetheart," she says with regret in her voice. Obediently, Liam places the cookies back on the shelf without a word of complaint. But this scene doesn't escape the notice of the store owner, Mr. Griffin. A middle-aged man with a rough exterior, a big belly, and perpetually scowling eyes, he's all too familiar with families like this. People he considers a waste of time and a source of trouble. He mumbles to himself, constantly muttering curses under his breath. Olivia approaches the cash register, her hands trembling as she counts her coins. Before she can place her items on the counter, Mr. Griffin storms out. "Hey!" he shouts loudly, his harsh tone startling everyone in the store. Olivia freezes in place, and little Chloe clings tightly to her mother's arm, frightened. Mr. Griffin points his pudgy finger at them. "If you don't have enough money, don't waste my time by coming here. And this isn't a charity." Olivia's face flushes with shame. I have money," she stammers, holding up her handful of loose coins. "I just need to buy a few things." He sneers, folding his arms across his chest. "That handful of change isn't even enough to buy a loaf of bread. Go somewhere else." Liam steps forward, his small body trembling, looking up at the store owner. Please, we just need a little food. My sister hasn't eaten since yesterday." Mr. Griffin glares down at the boy, his eyes cold. "Not my problem. Get out before I call the police." Suddenly, from a quiet corner of the store, a man silently steps forward. He's dressed simply, wearing only a black jacket and jeans, blending into the crowd. But the way he stands, his calm demeanor radiating a unique presence, draws everyone's attention. That man, we'll call him Owen, observes the situation with composure. He watches Olivia's every move, the fear in little Chloe's eyes, and the disappointment on Liam's face. Owen sets down the can he was holding and begins to act. As Olivia hurriedly gathered her belongings, tears welling in her eyes, Owen stepped forward. He positioned himself between the Parker family and the store owner, creating a clear boundary. Owen's presence silenced the murmurs around them. "That's enough," Owen said, his voice calm yet commanding. His tone wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made the store owner pause. The room seemed to hold its breath, and every eye turned to the man who had just spoken. "Mr." Griffin frowned, clearly annoyed. "Who are you? This is my store, and I'll do whatever I want," he snapped. Owen tilted his head slightly, his expression remaining unchanged. "It is your store," he said, his tone composed. But does that give you the right to treat others like this?" Mr. Griffin sneered. "Listen, buddy, if you're here to buy something, then buy it. Don't tell me how to run my business." Owen took a step closer, his calm demeanor unwavering. "Running a business doesn't give you the right to strip people of their dignity," he said, his voice gentle yet meaningful, especially those who are just trying to feed their families. The atmosphere in the store grew tense. Customers who had been pretending not to notice were now fully focused on the situation. Olivia stood frozen, her children clutching her tightly, all of them watching intently. Mr. Griffin laughed mockingly. "What? Are you going to pay for them? Do you think you're some kind of superhero?" Owen didn't reply immediately. Instead, he calmly reached into his wallet and placed a $100 bill on the counter. This will cover their food, he said, his tone steady, but his gaze sharp. The store owner was stunned into silence. Customers began murmuring among themselves, some nodding in agreement, others starting to pull out their wallets. Olivia's eyes widened, unable to believe what was happening. "You don't have to do this," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Owen turned to her, his gaze softening. "It's not about having to," he said gently. "It's about wanting to." The entire store fell silent as Owen's words echoed through the space. Olivia stood motionless, overcome with emotion from this unexpected act of kindness. Meanwhile, Mr. Griffin stared at the bill on the counter, clearly flustered. The customers, who had initially been mere spectators, began speaking up, their voices growing louder. One by one, they started stepping forward. A middle-aged woman holding a basket of vegetables opened her wallet and added $20 to the counter. "No child should go hungry," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. A young man followed, pulling a few crumpled bills from his pocket. "That's right," he said, placing the money down. "This isn't right." An older man with a kind face placed a hand on Olivia's shoulder. "We're with you," he said gently. "Don't feel ashamed. You're not alone." Tears streamed down Olivia's face as she looked around at the strangers rallying behind her family. "Thank you. Thank you all," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I don't know how to thank you all." Owen smiled softly, his calm presence helping to steady her. "You don't need to thank anyone," he said. "This isn't charity. This is what people should do for one another." Mr. Griffin, now visibly flustered, slammed his hand on the counter. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "You're all ruining my business. This is my store, and I won't let you turn it into some charity giveaway." As Olivia hastily gathered her belongings, tears brimming in her eyes, Owen turned to face Mr. Griffin. His gaze remained calm but resolute. "You're right," he said, his voice steady yet commanding. "This is your store, but the way you treat people here says a lot about you." Mr. Griffin's face flushed red with anger. "I don't need a lecture from someone who thinks they're better than everyone else," he snapped. Owen stepped closer, his expression unchanging. "I don't think I'm better than you," he replied softly, "but I do think you've forgotten what it means to be human." The customers around them murmured in agreement, their voices growing louder. "He's right," one person said. "You can't treat people like that." Another added, "You can't kick people out just because they're struggling." Cornered, Mr. Griffin waved his hand angrily. "Fine," he growled. "Take your things and get out of here, but don't come back." Owen didn't take his eyes off Mr. Griffin. He reached into his wallet again and placed another $100 bill on the counter. "They won't need to come back," he said firmly, "because today they'll leave with everything they need." Then he turned to Olivia. "Take everything your family needs," he told her. "Don't worry about the cost. It's all covered." Olivia hesitated, glancing between Owen and the items, her hands trembling. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "We don't deserve this." Owen gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Everyone deserves kindness," he said simply, "and no child should have to go to bed hungry." As Olivia and her children began gathering their items, other customers continued to step forward. Bills and coins were steadily placed on the counter. Mr. Griffin stood behind it, fuming in silence, his initial arrogance now replaced with smoldering frustration. One by one, the customers turned to Owen, admiration evident on their faces. "Thank you for standing up," an elderly man said. "It's about time someone did." Owen nodded humbly. "It's not about standing up," he replied. "It's about showing that we're all in this together." Liam approached Owen, holding the small pack of cookies he had put back earlier. "Can I take this?" the boy asked quietly. Owen crouched down to meet his gaze and smiled warmly. "Of course you can," he said, "and don't forget to share with your sister." The boy beamed, clutching the cookies to his chest. "Thank you, sir," he said. "You're the nicest person I've ever met." Owen chuckled softly and patted the boy's head. "It's nothing, son. Just remember, kindness is never wasted." As Olivia and her children finished gathering their items, the atmosphere in the store had completely transformed. What began as a moment of tension and humiliation had turned into one of solidarity and inspiring generosity. Customers continued contributing, not just money, but also words of encouragement for the family. A woman approached Olivia and handed her a small piece of paper. "This is my phone number," she said gently. "If you need help finding a job or a place to stay, call me. I understand how hard this can be. Olivia replied, her voice choked with emotion. Thank you so much. I never expected such kindness. Meanwhile, Owen remained by the counter, his gaze fixed on Mr. Griffin. The store owner stayed silent, frustration evident in his clenched fists and tight expression. Finally, unable to hold back, he snapped. Do you think you're some kind of hero? He sneered at Owen. Coming in here and showing off like that. Owen tilted his head slightly, his calm demeanor unwavering. It's not about being a hero, he replied. It's about doing the right thing. Maybe you should try it sometime. The murmurs of agreement from the surrounding customers grew louder, their support unmistakable. The bitterness of the store owner, Mr. Griffin, had been overshadowed. A young man in the crowd spoke up. You know, you could have handled this differently. Instead of throwing them out, you could have shown a little compassion. Mr. Griffin glanced at him, but said nothing. Owen turned to the crowd and spoke, his voice calm yet sincere. We all have a choice, he said. Every day, we decide what kind of world we want to live in. Do we want to be the ones who turn a blind eye when others are struggling, or do we want to be the ones who stand up and make a difference? The room fell silent as his words resonated with everyone. Even those who had initially hesitated now felt proud for having stood up. An older man stepped forward and gently placed a hand on Mr. Griffin's shoulder. Son, you've got a good business here, he said kindly. But you'll lose more than money if you treat people like this. Missed. Griffin's expression softened briefly, perhaps showing a hint of regret, but he quickly masked it with a scowl and muttered, Fine, do whatever you want. Owen didn't say anything further. He turned to look at Olivia and her children, who were already standing by the door with their belongings. Are you and the kids ready to go? He asked gently. Olivia nodded, her eyes brimming with emotion. Yes, we're ready. Thank you for everything. As the family prepared to leave, Owen crouched down to Chloe's level. The little girl had remained silent the whole time, clutching her old stuffed animal tightly. Take care of your mom and brother, okay? He said softly. You're stronger than you think. The little girl nodded, a small smile spreading across her face. Thank you, she whispered. Owen stood and watched as they walked out the door, their spirits lifted by the kindness they had just experienced. The other customers continued chatting, some still placing money on the counter as an act of solidarity. Before leaving, Owen turned to look at Mr. Griffin one last time. You have a chance to make things right, he said, his voice firm but not harsh. Think about the kind of person you want to be. Mr. Griffin didn't respond, but his silence spoke volumes. Owen gave a slight nod before turning and walking out of the store, leaving behind a lesson that no one inside would ever forget. Owen gave a slight nod and turned to leave the store, leaving behind an unforgettable lesson for everyone inside. As Owen stepped out of the door, the soft chime of the doorbell rang, marking the end of a moment that would remain in everyone's memory. Outside, Olivia and her children were standing on the sidewalk, arranging their bags. Liam was still clutching the pack of cookies tightly, his face beaming with happiness. Owen approached them, his calm demeanor helping to ease their tension. Do you have a way to get home? He asked, his voice warm and reassuring. Olivia hesitated, biting her lip. We usually take the bus, she replied, glancing at her children, but it's quite a long walk to the bus stop. Owen nodded thoughtfully. Without a word, he pulled out his phone. A moment later, he had arranged a ride for them. You don't have to walk today, he said with a friendly smile. Everything's been taken care of. Olivia's eyes widened in surprise. You've already done so much for us, she whispered, her voice trembling. Why are you doing this for us? Owen crouched down to meet her gaze, his eyes gentle. Because sometimes we all need a little help, he said. And one day, when you're in a position to help someone else, I hope you'll do the same. Meanwhile, inside the store, the atmosphere had completely transformed. The customers were still talking about what had just happened, their voices filled with admiration for the mysterious man who had stood up for a struggling family. A few people approached Mr. Griffin, their words honest but not harsh. You know, one man said, you have the power to make a difference in this community. Too? It might be time for you to start using it. Another customer, a kind-faced woman, added, people will remember how you treat them. A little kindness can go a long way. Mr. Griffin remained silent, his mind in turmoil. He glanced at the pile of money on the counter, a tangible symbol of the kindness he had just witnessed. Though he said nothing, his expression revealed a subtle change, a small crack in the wall of indifference he had built around himself. Outside, the car Owen had ordered arrived, a clean and spacious vehicle that would take Olivia and her children home safely. As they climbed into the car, Olivia turned back to look at Owen one last time. "Thank you," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Today, you've given us more than just food. You've given us hope." Owen nodded, his expression gentle. "Take care of yourselves," he said, "and remember, you're not alone." The car slowly drove off, and Owen stood on the sidewalk, watching as it disappeared into the distance. For a moment, he smiled, knowing he had made a difference. Back inside the store, the elderly man who had spoken earlier approached the counter. "Do you know who that was?" he asked Mr. Griffin, his tone curious. Mr. Griffin shook his head, still looking dazed. "No," he muttered, "but he sure thinks he's something special." The elderly man chuckled softly. "He is someone special," he said. "That was Owen Sterling." Mr. Griffin froze, his eyes widening in disbelief. "The actor," he stammered. The elderly man nodded, his smile growing wider. "That's right, and he didn't do it for attention or fame. He did it because it was the right thing to do." The information quickly spread through the store, leaving everyone astonished. Customers whispered excitedly to one another, and some pulled out their phones to look up the man who had just left. Meanwhile, Mr. Griffin stood frozen behind the counter, his mind racing as he realized the significance of what had just happened. Owen's simple act of kindness had not only helped a struggling family, but had also left an indelible mark on the hearts of everyone present. The impact of his actions would continue to ripple outward, inspiring others to choose compassion over indifference. As the store buzzed with whispers about Owen Sterling, Mr. Griffin remained rooted behind the counter, his expression shifting from surprise to something deeper, regret. He glanced at the pile of money left by the customers, their kindness standing in stark contrast to his earlier cruelty. For the first time, he began to question his actions. The elderly man who had recognized Owen approached the counter once again, his voice still gentle but firm. "You have a chance to change," he said. "Not just for your business, but for yourself. People remember kindness, and they remember cruelty too. It's never too late to choose how you want to be remembered." Mr. Griffin nodded slowly, his defensive posture beginning to crumble. "I never thought about it like that," he admitted, his voice quieter than before. "I've always just focused on profit." The elderly man gave a warm smile. "It's never too late to start focusing on people. You see, kindness can accomplish so much." Outside, Owen walked down the street, blending into the flow of the bustling city. He didn't need recognition or praise. What mattered to him was that he had made a difference, no matter how small. But as he passed a park bench, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and saw a message from his assistant, reminding him about the charity fundraiser he was scheduled to attend that evening. Pausing for a moment, Owen looked back toward the store. Back in the store, customers were still chatting animatedly about what had just taken place. A small smile appeared on Owen's face. He realized that this moment was more meaningful than any event he could attend. It was a reminder of the quiet power of individual acts of kindness. Meanwhile, in the car, Olivia and her children sat silently. Their belongings had been carefully stored in the trunk. Liam turned to his mother, his voice filled with excitement. "Mom, do you think he's a superhero?" he asked, his wide eyes sparkling with wonder. Olivia smiled and gently ruffled his hair. "Maybe not a superhero," she said, "but he's definitely someone special." Chloe, still clutching her old stuffed animal tightly, whispered, "He made me feel like we matter, like we're important." Olivia's heart ached as she realized just how deeply Owen's actions had touched her family. "We do matter," she said firmly, "and one day we'll pay this kindness forward." As the car slowly pulled away, the effects of that day continued to ripple outward. Customers left the store feeling inspired, some calling their friends and loved ones to share what they had witnessed. The elderly man who had spoken to Mr. Griffin walked away with a sense of satisfaction, knowing he had planted a seed of change. Meanwhile, Mr. Griffin, now alone in the store, stared at the pile of money left by the customers. For the first time, he felt the weight of his actions and the potential for redemption. Owen kept walking, blending into the rhythm of the city. His actions that day, though simple, were profoundly meaningful. They served as a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness can create powerful waves of change. And while he never sought recognition for what he had done, the lives he had touched would carry his legacy forward. As the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Owen looked up and smiled. Today was a good day, he thought, a day that proved the world could become a better, kinder place with just one act of compassion. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to catch the next video. Goodbye, and see you next time.